So I'm going to start by introducing our wonderful panelists here today. We start with Jenni Olson, who's a film historian, filmmaker, Wolfe Video Vice President of E-commerce and Consumer Marketing. She was also the founder of Planet Out and former co-director of the Frameline Film Festival. Allie Esslinger is the founder of Section 2, an emerging platform being called the Lesbian Netflix. Section 2 acquires, creates, and showcases curated LGBTQ films, shorts, and series. Max Silverman is the operations czar for Seed&Spark. Max brought his background with technology startups to Seed&Spark, a selective platform assisting films from crowdfunding to distribution on their dynamic platform. And Dean Hamer is an Emmy and Sundance Award-winning filmmaker, New York Times Book of the Year science author, and LGBT activist. His film Kumu, Hina is playing in this year's festival and got a standing ovation over at the Castro the other day. So if you haven't seen it, be sure to listen to Dean when he talks about the distribution for the film that's going to be forthcoming. So we're going to try to talk sort of from the life of the film, talking about building audience and crowdfunding, doing a theatrical or festival run and then distribution, but it's a loose conversation, so kind of stick with us on it. So starting with sort of audience, you used to be able to kind of create a film first and then worry about your audience and getting a distributor later. This all seems to kind of merge now, particularly with social media and crowdfunding. So I'd like to ask, how do you build audience, and is this different for LGBTQ audiences? I'd like to start with Dean, if possible. Your film Kumu, Hina, your Facebook page goes back to 2011, has over 5,000 likes, and the film is just debuting this year. So could you talk a little bit about sort of building community through social media and knowing your audience while you're still in pre-production?
Sure, we think it's really important to be building not just an audience for people to watch the film, but to start building networks for people that are going to use the film themselves for activism or for getting together with other people or for changing hearts and minds. So that's always been an intrinsic part of our filmmaking. With Kumu Hina, when we first met Hina, we knew this was going to be a really cool film. And the first thing we did was to reach out to all her friends. She already has a big presence in Hawaii. A lot of people know her. And so we just started, friending all of her friends and building a Hawaiian network. And at the same time, we were just in the process of moving to Hawaii, we started reaching out to the whole LGBT community in Hawaii. So going through groups like Equality and so on and talking with those people. And then also through the sort of Hawaiian audiences, because there's a lot of Hawaiian music groups and Hawaiian cultural groups, not very much in Hawaiian film, and sort of trying to go out to all of those different audiences at the same time. And then over time, as one person told another, we slowly built up a bit of a backing. And I think that's been very important, because we know as the film comes out now, there are going to be people who are going to be looking at it and helping pass it around.
Jenni, as someone who's been making films for 20 years, how long have you been a filmmaker? About that. Tell us a little bit about the difference between making films earlier and today and sort of keeping in mind audience while doing so.
Since I've been around for so long. Obviously it is very different now, and my current film that I'm actually starting editing next week, The Royal Road, theroyalroad.com, theroyalroadmovie.com. I did a Kickstarter campaign. Dean is one of my 425 backers. There's a few others out in the audience. It is a kind of thing where you ask every single person you know, and then the connecting with the constituents and the people. And I think it's, I always tell filmmakers in festivals and in any context, it's like, don't be shy. You're making a film that people assume that people want to see the film. They want to know about it, and it is going to serve them. They're going to, utilize it. So obviously having tools like Kickstarter and social media is very different than the olden days of fax machines and such. Actually, I'm curious, how many filmmakers do we have in the audience, let's say, narrative feature filmmakers and feature documentary filmmakers and short or documentary narrative, short, either doc or narrative? Okay, so a lot, okay. So, you know, in terms of the outreach component, and so Sundance has a great thing called Artist Services. The resource thing on the Frameline page is fantastic. You should totally go check it out. It has like, you know, A to Z, you know, kind of all the stuff that we're gonna cover, and like very deep. But Sundance Artist Services has great stuff. Seed&Spark has all these great resource like PDFs. And the Film Collaborative also has really in-depth stuff. And then you all have to talk to each other. And like that's the biggest thing, is like getting the resources of like how, you know, how did you do that? And obviously it's nice to have this kind of formal opportunity to do that. But anyway, having all of those kind of resources is something that it's great to see that more developed now than back in the day.
So one question that we get is sort of how do you stand out with so much crowdfunding? A lot of our filmmakers here today, and I think most of our filmmakers at this point who are coming to the festival have done some sort of crowdfunding on one of the major platforms. Allie, you're currently crowdfunding for the launch of Section 2 using Seed&Spark. How does that work for your platform? It's not quite the same as for a film, but tell us sort of how you're going about crowdfunding and trying to stand out when there's so many options out there.
Sure. We're using Seed&Spark, which we're really excited about. Emily, who's the CEO, is one of our board of advisors. It's hard. It's a full-time job. I think it's something that gets easier the longer you're in the game, but when you really need the money to start something, it's a lot of diligence, it's a lot of begging, it's a lot of relying on the community, and I think that it's one of those things where one of the dirty secrets right now of crowdfunding is crowdfund when you don't actually need the money. So it's not as much of a tool or this like stepping stone that we'd kind of like it to be. And one of the things that we're trying to do at Section 2, of course the consumer-facing platform for finding content is great, but we're really trying to build out a system for filmmakers to lean on us and to use our accumulated audiences from across pre-aggregated fan bases of different filmmakers so that they can lean on them, and we're able to get the word out about crowdfunding campaigns for all the people within the system as well, so that new people are, the biggest thing is reach, like getting in front of as many people as possible. So assuming we do well in ours, we'll be able to really pay that forward and start helping filmmakers to get in front of each other's audiences as well when they're crowdfunding in the future.
Yeah, just to add to that, I'm glad you mentioned begging, because we launched a new crowdfunding education course, and one of the main points that we stress is that if you're pleading, nobody's going to respond to it. Like, it has to be something that you're sharing or giving to engage your audience, to have them sort of sign on to come with you on the journey of the project or the platform that you're building. So I think being in a position where you're not desperate for money, so making sure you have that time frame is really, really important.
Dean, you have some more classic funding sources for Kumu, Hina. How have you noticed, does that affect how you choose to shoot the film, how you choose to, either you're gonna have runtime constraints possibly, or you're gonna have editing check-ins as you go. So can you speak a little bit to sort of how those classic funding methods work versus maybe newer ones?
I would say that actually having a salary that you can live on is a good thing for a filmmaker. Unusual, but a good thing. So we were, for this our second feature, we went the classic route that's really still the best route for social issue documentaries in particular. And that is through public television, because they do actually still fund films all the way through and provide distribution through public television to a large audience. So if you have a social issue documentary, I would strongly advise doing that. We went first to Pacific Islanders in Communication, which is a minority consortia. If you are working on a so-called minority film, that is African American, Native American, Latino, Pacific Islander, unfortunately, there's not a gay one, and there's not going to be one, I don't think. But if you're working on any of those minorities, it's great to go to the Minority Consortium first, because they not only will help you get funding, but they connect you with a whole community of other filmmakers who are serving that community and the people, and it's terrific. And that in turn allowed us to get open call funding from ITVS, which funded the movie. and which will then broadcast it on PBS. So it's really incredible because it removes from you the necessity to be fundraising all the time and to really concentrate on the film. So, you know, if it works for your particular film, it's great.
So sort of moving on as a festival, as someone who's worked at Frameline for a number of years, we get asked every year if there's still a need for LGBT film festivals. With so much queer content making its way to TV and somewhat in mainstream films, although that's obviously limited. We do always have our answer to this, but in terms of as a filmmaker or just generally, you know, how do festivals play into it these days when everything is changing regarding theatricals and things are changing, you know, regarding premiere status when there's so many web series and things like that? You know, what do you think the place of festivals is at this point?
I'll say I think they are absolutely key when they work the way Frameline does, by building up a community and by having enthusiastic audiences. I don't understand exactly how Frameline does it, except being in San Francisco, but it is incredible. Festivals are now the curators of independent film, and that's how people know whether your film is good, is if you have laurels. So they're important in that regard, but they're also important because they can launch a film. And I can just say that we were so happy. I mean, it's a personal thrill to be like at the Castro and have people applauding. That's a big place. But I know that word of that got around to people at PBS in Washington and here, and I know it got to New York and to people at Ford Foundation, which is awesome. And so they play a really, really critical role. And I just really hope and pray that all of the LGBT festivals that there are all around the country will be able to keep up the work, because they do play a really important role.
I think, I mean, speaking as a distributor working for Wolfe, I mean, we, you know, so many films, and there's so many filmmakers who would like to have a theatrical release, and it's just not possible. It's not going to happen. And we talk about it as that the festivals kind of are that, you know, and that those are the places where, you know, that the filmmakers get to have the amazing experience of a audience and interacting with the audience. And that you get the things that you need. You need, you know, pull quotes for marketing and laurels for marketing, and word of mouth, and that kind of legitimacy of this is a real movie. It's not a direct-to-video, you know. You know, and for short filmmakers, you know, sadly there are very few options. It's heartening to see that Frameline is doing short DVD compilations again. We stopped doing them because they just weren't profitable anymore. But and Busk Films, which was doing shorts, are not anymore. There just are fewer and fewer opportunities, and so, you know, festivals are one of the only places where filmmakers can get their shorts out there.
For us, we're so excited to be out at festivals and meeting people with content and development as well as content premiering. And we really are pushing with the content that we have right now to work in conjunction with festival runs and even with festivals in general to try and use all the press and marketing as a final push before a wide release. Like, with technology available as it is right now, it's easy enough for a producer to be on stage at a Q&A right after their film premieres and then press a button and also allow all the people at home to have access to the film finally, probably that they donated to during a Seed&Spark campaign or have heard the buzz leading up to the premiere at the festival. So it's just a really great way to leverage all of this free press as marketing and really be able to follow up on those pull quotes immediately and make content available, which is really exciting and really helps with the bottom line, whether it's a short or a feature.
Yeah, I'll sort of piggyback on that and say that I think that the old model of distribution where a filmmaker would produce the work, submit it to a festival, get accepted, get a screening, and then land a distribution deal at a major festival is not viable anymore. And even for the people who are getting those distribution deals that are becoming fewer and fewer. So the real key is marketing. The festivals are your chance to get the exposure and then leverage that exposure in the moment to build your audience. Because you're getting sort of this diverse set of viewers across the country, you know, wherever the festivals are happening, and they can become evangelists for your film if they have, you know, a memorable experience, you know, watching it. So it really is about publicity, marketing, and being able to spread the word.
I'm just gonna have to, duke it out with you here because, I mean, because I work for Wolfe Video, and because I'm a filmmaker, and I have, I've had many distributors over the years, Strand Releasing, Frameline Distribution, Wolfe Video, and Film Buff actually, in terms of that kind of do-it-yourself, direct-to-digital route, and. I mean, it is really exciting that there are so many opportunities for filmmakers to have these things in their own hands and to do, like what you just said, like to be like, hey, like go right now, you can go buy my film, or I just, caution filmmakers to be thoughtful about it, that when you do things, every decision you make, as is true in production as well, is gonna have an effect down the road, and if you do want to go with a traditional distribution route, you just need to be mindful that you don't screw things up down the road. I just had a conversation with a filmmaker last week who did a digital-only deal with a feature, like a pretty big feature, and it's great. They have iTunes and all the digital platforms, but they would like to have a DVD release, and they won't, because a traditional distributor is not going to just buy their DVD rights, because you can't make enough money on that. We typically will acquire DVD, digital, and the combination of things enables us to do that, and that we're in partnership with you as a filmmaker. We're investing our resources and relationships and skills and 20, 30 years of experience to get your film out there, and anyway, and that that it is about like the whole picture and the whole life of the film. Personally, I make experimental films that Wolfe would never distribute the kind of films that I make. Frameline would and has, and so I'm in certain ways more interested in the kind of do-it-yourself stuff, and yet I'm like, please, Alexis, deal with my festivals and shipping all the the exhibition copies and putting it in the catalog and getting it out, getting the word out, and I don't have time for that. And that's what my contract with you is like. I'm like, yeah, and you get half the money for that, and that's great. But it's exciting that there are more ways that if you are like, I want to do this myself, I have those opportunities. But do you know what I mean?
I get where you're coming from, I guess. And just looking at the economics of the industry and seeing that even the biggest pictures that are at the premier festivals that get picked up, like the money that makes its way back to the filmmaker is generally not nearly enough to even sustain them over the course of that festival.
Not necessarily. I was just talking to Rose Trochet this morning at the 20th anniversary screening of Go Fish. Concussion, I think this is it's on IMDb. Concussion only costs $300,000, and they made back $900,000. They did great.
I think those are becoming outlier cases more and more.
I don't know. I work in distribution. We have, there are plenty of films in this festival that have, solid distribution.
Well,
it's getting more difficult. Sorry?
I think budget is a big part of it. I think when you come with a mind towards constraining the budget as much as possible, then you kind of create that opportunity to a large degree.
Well, do you guys think that we're kind of having two separate conversations here? I mean, obviously, but in terms of, shorts versus features, Jenni, you're saying that it's hard for shorts to get picked up by a distributor. So, obviously I think that those online platforms and the day and date, and, a lot of festivals aren't going to be as concerned about premiere status on a short as they are with a feature, and they may not have as much of a problem with sort of a day and date model on a short. And so it seems like we're having, there's shorts versus features. There's also how someone's accessing your film. Who is your audience? Because some films, if you're only going to have the type of people who are going to buy DVDs or go to theaters, if you're skewing a little bit older or a little bit more established, or if it's something that works on public television, I think, are you both sort of right here? And it just sort of depends what's your film and who's your audience and how much did you spend?
I think knowing your film is really the key to every decision that you're going to make throughout production and distribution. A bidding war at Sundance is awesome, but what we're learning more and more is that you can't bank on it. And if it's happening, then even if it was in your plan to push that release button, you would hold off and you could change your plan on the fly, because it's just, again, something you're controlling on your own and making that decision. But I think just knowing the film and knowing what you want out of it, if it's a short and you want clicks, then an embed agreement on a platform that's not charging and it's just delivering you audience is awesome. If it's a feature and you want to make your money back, then I think once you've taken investment, and I think it's a question of where you got your money in the first place, but once you've taken investment, then you're obligated to make as much money as possible. So if it's a theatrical run that's going to cost a lot of money versus a digital run with a built-in audience that's going to ensure that your investor makes money back, I think you really have decisions to make based on what you want. If you can make your investors whole, you can make more movies. And if that's the end goal versus a theatrical run or something like that, I think that really is where these decisions are born.
Yeah, although, I mean, you still always run into, I was just talking in the lobby about, so I executive produced the film Test, the feature that played here last year, and we just had a theatrical a couple weeks ago, and I was saying, it was the perfect example of why people will do a theatrical on even on a small independent film where, because you want to get the pull quotes, you know, and we were like the poster child of like success, and 90% of them are like, yeah, you're not going to make any money at the box office. It's going to cost you a lot of money to get it out there. It's really a lot of work, all the marketing and stuff. And but what you get, we just got extended at the Quad for the 3rd week, and like incredible New York Times critics pick, like all the great reviews, and it was like that's why you do that, and go to all that trouble. The thing, and then ultimately it does pay off. You will make more money. We will do better on digital, and we did a VOD day and date on the theatrical, so it was like, iTunes, and then we get better placement on iTunes, and so it does actually, even though it costs money, it ends up making you more money. But it is always like, it's like betting on the horses of like whether that's really going to pay off or not. And the truth is, most of the time it doesn't, or very often it doesn't.
Which is a very good segue to theatrical on demand.
Yeah.
I think because, like you said, for a lot, we actually had already a theatrical offer, but when we thought about it playing 2 or 3 weeks in New York, 2 weeks in LA, and 2 weeks in Seattle, I think it's kind of like, well, that's not exactly where our audience is, and we're going to be advertising to a lot of people for this particular movie, which has multiple niches, but they are niches. Whereas this theatrical on-demand model, which is completely, to me, independent of the rest of distribution for DVD and everything, is great because the way this works is if there are 50 people who want to see the film, then they sign up, they get the theater, and it can work in any theater in any city in the country, and then there will be a screening, and it's guaranteed.
And are you talking about Tug or Gather?
In our case, Gather.
Gather.
Yeah.
So do you guys know Tug and Gather? Do I see nodding? No, I see shaking of heads.
Little yes, little no.
So, and like your film is a great film for Tug or Gather, especially if you have something where you have a really strong need for it, as opposed to just like some random romantic comedy where people are like, yeah, I really need to like work hard to get to see that. But that people are really invested in like, I want to get this, I want to, and that you make partnerships with organizations in those communities. And
it's perfect. So briefly what this is there are these new groups like Tug and like Gather, and they have made a deal with theaters all across the country. It's not just indie art houses, but all of the major chains also, Royal and Regal and all those places. And the deal is your movie's on their website. If people in, let's say, Sacramento want to see it, and 50
information about your movie, not the movie itself.
Not the movie itself. No, it's not streaming at all. It's a theatrical deal. If somebody in Sacramento says, "Wow, I'd like to see this film and bring all my friends to see it. I'd like to bring my hula halau to come see it, or I'd like my Boy Scout club to see it, or whatever," then they sign up. They get 50 people to buy tickets in advance. If they do that, then the film will screen there, and the print gets shipped, and the theater is open, and you play it. Filmmaker gets, in the 30% range, the usual range. The rest goes to the theater and for promotions. But it means there won't be a screening unless people want to see it. And if people want to see it, there will be a screening. So that's the ethical end of it.
Oh, but the thing about it is that in my experience, it's helpful if you're you're like, okay, we're going to connect with the Asian Pacific Islander group in Sacramento and say, hey,
So the filmmaker is contacting every hula halal across the country and every API group and every group and saying, hey, this film is available. You can go see it at your theater if you're interested.
Well, I think, I'm sorry, Dean. But I think that segues nicely into sort of, we've been talking generally, but talking specifically about queer films and how important queer community is. One of the reasons that Frameline is so successful is that we're blessed to have, a San Francisco Bay Area crowd and to have, 38 years behind us. But when we're looking at what distribution means nationally, some distributors have sort of a limit, right? They're like, oh, well, we already have our Black lesbian film for the year, or we already have, this really, the documentary that makes you cry and ends really poorly. So I can't have 2 of those because I can't sell 2 of those, right? So I think as queer filmmakers and queer film purveyors out here, it's interesting to think about, and I just didn't know if anybody wanted to speak to sort of how, within community and sort of what, the dirty secrets of the queer community and queer filmmaking is what sells versus what doesn't. And, how does that affect when you're doing your marketing or when you're trying to sell or what platforms you're on?
All right, well, here's a tip.
You don't have to answer, Jenni.
No. I mean, so here's the tip. Take good production photos because the key art is so crucial. And unfortunately, in the LGBT niche, girls kissing and guys with their shirts off are very helpful. And it's and it's just a sad fact in the marketing world, and that it is. It's just harder to market. I mean, I feel like some of the best films that Wolfe distributes are, like, there was a film from 2 years ago called The Wise Kids that played here. Great movie, really great movie about a young gay guy growing up in the South and his 2 female best friends. And like that art, those images of those people does not say gay at all. And from a marketing standpoint, I want you, gay audience to see this movie. It's like, how do I achieve that? And so it's just a lot more work when you have a more complicated film. And so, but whatever, having good key art is good. But of course, we don't want every single box cover to be the girls kissing and the guys with their shirts off.
Yeah, this comes up in the Frameline catalog also. There's only one picture of guys with their shirts off per page. We gotta.
And it's amazing that transgender film in particular is really like, there are so many really great transgender films, and like every year. And they are also harder to market. And I think that they probably get picked up less frequently.
So that's an interesting point. And to me, the real key is, to paraphrase John Kennedy, not to ask what the distributor can do for you, but what you can do for the distributor. So it's always our approach to try to help bring new audiences to the distributor, as well as benefit from the audiences that the distributor already has. So if we were going to Wolfe, for example, they have a great LGBT audience because they've been working on that for many years. They have great content. A lot of people, queers looking for films or universities looking for queer films or whatever, are going to go there. So we want to be able to bring them a different audience, which in our case would be Hawaiian people and indigenous people and API and all of that, so that you get that combination of audiences, which if you're doing niche films, and all gay films are to some extent a niche film, you got to have a lot of niches for it to really work, I think. This is why, like, our cover art for Kumu, Hina, if any of you saw it, that real, you just look at that and go, whoa, you don't go, that's a trainee film. You don't go, that's a Hawaiian film. You go, whoa, who is that? Or of course, pictures of smiling kids, always good, you know. So yeah, to me, it's really a matter of pulling together different groups and combining groups and going across borders that way.
I think with this new wave of distribution, a lot of people like to say it's the Wild West because everyone's just really trying to figure out what's working and how to work together. What we want to do as a distribution company is really leverage technology and this intersection of content and technology as both a marketing tool and a next step in this ongoing movement for equality and movement for pushing past these sorts of representations. And what we are working on, we're a film startup, so we're fundraising right now, but we're really raising money for P&A so that we can partner with filmmakers from development into production before they get to a point where they're looking to sell their film, so that we're engaged from the beginning in building out audiences both online and offline, so that when you get to the point of distribution, you're bringing either a traditional distributor or your own direct-to-fan distribution game a lot of audience, a lot of different sort of looks, professionals, stills on set, just a marketing team that's been behind you for the first year of your film before it's ready to go out, so that you're able to really, you have the demographics, but you also have an audience, which is important. And I think that's one of the things that Seed&Spark always talks about. It's not just these niches that are being brought together, they're audiences that are really invested in what you're doing. And when you're able to partner with a distribution company from the beginning to build that out and bolster your numbers, I think that's a huge help. Or I think that's one of the value adds that we can offer, not just to the content consumers, but to the content creators as well.
Yeah, and that goes back a little bit to what Hina was saying about bringing an audience to a distributor as being a valuable sort of asset. So as a filmmaker, if you can build your audience and sort of collect them along the way, you know, as you're planning and pre-production and producing your project, then when you're done with it, you have this sort of bargaining chip or asset to bring with you when you look for whatever paths of distribution you're taking.
And the most important part of that is you have these bargaining chips, so if the traditional model or the deals that you were hoping for after your festival premiere doesn't pan out, you have a little pushback to either ask for more or to really set out financially and know that you'll be able to ensure some sustainability as you start to develop your next project.
Yeah, I think, Allie, when you talk about the Wild West, I think that's definitely kind of what's going on out there.
I wish I could think of something else.
I know, they really use that in every panel. But I mean, I think the interesting thing is we're very much, I mean, I think I think on this panel, some people are saying we're past the tipping point, and some people are saying we're not quite there, and that's the interesting thing is there are still old models, you know, at Frameline distribution, we sell educational DVDs for the most part, we have some streaming. You know, one of the films we acquired last year, A Self-Made Man, is a transgender documentary about a youth advocate, and you know, a lot of our sales have been because the filmmaker is still touring with the film, and every time she plays somewhere, the film, you know, people will come to our site and buy it. A lot of our sales are to the guy who's the subject of the film, where we just, you know, we send him DVDs at cost, so that when he's out talking about his work, he has a DVD of his work. You know, we're obviously a non-profit distributor, so, you know, we're able to kind of make the decisions of the types of films and the types of distribution that are not necessarily the most lucrative financially, where we're literally just printing DVDs in my office and putting them in a box and sending them to Tony, who's in the film, you know. But in general, you know, I think everyone is having to play by very different rules now than they did a few years ago. You know, at Frameline distribution, we moved from exclusive to non-exclusive contracts. You know, we have shorter contracts than a lot of folks do, but there are, you know, still some constraints. I know, Jenni, when we launched the toolkit a couple months ago, you sent me an email and you were like, this is really great, but you know, you're talking about all these new ways and new rules, but there's still constraints when you talk about foreign markets, when you talk about sort of the system that we've inherited and that we're still navigating. I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, you mean like the traditional, like there are still windows that are just a reality, and
yeah.
You know, I mean, it depends on what kind of a film you're making, and like, you know, for better or worse, mostly short filmmakers, you don't have as many opportunities. Although even that, like my friend Amy Harrison, who has Miss Finknagel Succumbs to Chaos.
That's such a cute film.
In the festival, like she got the Profund, the German distributor. They still do shorts programs, and you know, I don't know how much money she got, but like her, you know, her short, little lesbian short is going to be on a shorts compilation, and you know, they are like, yeah, we don't want you to put that online and have that be available digitally around the world, because that would mess up our thing. And so, you know, and so Wolfe, we have Wolfe video DVDs and Wolfe on demand, and you know, but when we acquire a film, we don't want a filmmaker to be like, yeah, it's already available on YouTube for free. And you know, I mean, we will run into things where like somebody did. Your Kickstarter campaign was that the reward you're going to get is a DVD, and that you like self-published the DVD and you know, sent it out to people. We're like, oh, okay, you know. But you do still have to be mindful of that if you're making, you know, something that you're wanting to put it out in the world and get it out there as big as you can. And it's just a reality that, like, it's like actually The Joy of Life, my last film from 10 years ago, Film Buff has it, and they just did a sale to Fandor.com for $1,500, which is like, on the one hand, not very much for a feature, but it's like an experimental feature that like I didn't really expect to make any money off of. And you know, that's thrilling. And you know, so but if I had like, you know, been like, oh, I'm gonna put it on YouTube, like that would not have happened. And anyway, it's just a reality that, you know, Netflix and Hulu and all of these larger entities and iTunes, you know, distributors are the ones who are gonna have access to those things, and they are going to want you to follow the rules.
It's a really fascinating question, because on the one hand, you want exclusivity so that people can buy it cheaper or see it for free. On the other hand, it's also absolutely true that the main reason that anybody is not watching your little indie film isn't because they're going to buy it cheaper someplace else, it's because they've never heard of it. Right. So the more buzz you get, the more good it is. So then it's a very interesting balancing act. Well, and let me just say, with Out in the Silence, because we are funded by Pennsylvania Public Television, it had kind of a weird, it came out in TV first, which is like the worst thing that you can do. And then it had its theatrical festival premiere in New York at Kennedy. And at the same time it had its big debut at Lincoln Center. It also came out for free on Snack Films and Hulu. And it came out on public television in New York. And we were like, oh shoot. And the DVD sales went from like almost nothing up to like huge on Amazon, when it became the #1 gay documentary film.
Because people had now
heard about it, yeah. So it's a very interesting thing, because on the other hand, then if you put it on Netflix, then it's bad, because everyone then actually can watch it for free. So it's...
You mean Netflix streaming?
Netflix
right.
streaming.
I mean, typically, you know, we'll do like the DVD and VOD, TVOD, which is transactional VOD, which is iTunes, you know, and then we'll, and like all the other like Comcast and stuff. And then, you know, you'll wait like, you know, a year to 2 years for SVOD, subscription VOD, which would be Netflix. You know, and people are always like, why isn't that movie streaming on Netflix? And, you know, because we're waiting to get that money down the line, because iTunes is like, no, you can't like make us pay a bunch of money for it and then have it be streaming on Netflix. And then like, and then further down, we'll go for like Hulu, ad-supported, you know, but each of those windows, there is money to be made, like real money. You just have to do it in the right order.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's why distributors and guys like you are going to be facing this also, how to time that in the best possible way. It's especially hard when you don't have a lot of background data, since a lot of this stuff is so new. You know?
Well, I think that's one really huge plug to start working with your distributor throughout production, so that you have people thinking about this and seeing the development of the film and the development of the audiences, and engaging with these platforms and working on deals based on fine cuts and rough cuts, and really start to promote the content before it's ready to be seen, so that you're building out the buzz and you're you're leveraging all of the work that you're doing on set and all of the engagement that you're doing, fulfilling your crowdfunding obligations, and using that to go to bigger platforms. Because the one thing that's definitely true is that it's better for you as a filmmaker, and it's better for your content, and it's better for your bottom line to be on as many platforms as possible. And whether that's a windowed structure or all at once, like getting that awareness out there is going to drive sales, and that's good for being able to start focusing on the next thing. And if you have people, whether a distribution company or your production team, who's working on that so that you can start working on your next film, that's just such a huge asset so that you can keep the sustainability of creating going on.
Allie, I think that raises an interesting question, which is, you know, if you're going to be helping films from production and then all the way through, I mean, there's a certain amount of curation, right? I mean, on Seed&Spark, for instance, you guys have to view the films before and you sort of decide which films that to some extent you're representing. I apologize if I'm a little off on that.
No, that's true. We
Okay.
we curate both the crowdfunding side and the streaming side.
Got it.
So that we have some quality control.
Yeah, and I appreciate there was section 2, you know, the plan is LBTQ, you know, sort of the underrepresented communities within gay film, oftentimes queer film. But, you know, you're still, what you're doing there is you're taking on curating, right? Because, you know, Netflix is maybe not curating, they're not watching films directly, they're getting films through Strand and Wolfe, right? So if you're doing it, then you're curating, right, on section 2, and it's not going through a distributor. So, I mean, it is a distributor, but it's all interesting because, you know, when we talk about festivals being a curator, you know, how does that change when you're talking about new platforms, and who's the person with the eyes on the content, and who's the person making the decisions of who are we representing here, and you know, you're only gonna have space for so many films if you're trying to do all of that for all those films.
Absolutely, and it's a lot. Like we decided to go LGBTQ because looking on the mainstream platforms, Netflix and Hulu, at one point in September, October, it was a 9-to-1 ratio of G versus everything else. I think the last time we counted it was 3-to-1. So like, yeah, it's getting better. But so we just really wanted to focus on the female focus. There's a huge underrepresentation of women in film in general. Like, that's what we did. Curation standpoint, on the flip side, my Netflix, it's always like, the Netflix audience has given this a 2.8. We think you're gonna give it a 4.5. Like, curation is not my strong suit. But Kara Smith, who's here in the back, she has a fine arts background. She's done a lot of curating. We used to work at SF MoMA. Like, there's a lot of thought that we're putting into it in terms of how we're producing. The stuff that we're really excited about, the slate of content that we're raising money for, both for production and marketing right now, are people who have been online. We're filmmakers by background, but we think that the need to be filled right now is both marketing and audience aggregation. But there are people doing some really incredible things that we're really excited about, and if we're able to accumulate an audience and apply supply and demand to our niche, underserved market, and get traditional financing into content, that's what we're really excited about. So we're using these people who want to make season 2 of a great web series or a follow-up short in a trilogy about queer women. Like, we're using the proof of concept from their initial stuff to sort of build out this first round of original content, so that it's not something that we're not producing in-house, we're just offering production support.
So we've talked about sort of a lot of different distribution models, and we touched briefly on free. So, you know, Frameline Voices, through the program we have, you know, it's grant-based, and so that's always interesting because, you know, funders come and go sometimes. But, you know, we, through Frameline, have about 110 films online, and some of those are older films that were in our collection and hadn't been up in a while, and some of them are newer films that played Frameline and didn't really have, as shorts, didn't have any options after a year or two, and so they ended up on our platform. So I was just wondering how, you know, that's one option for some queer films, but generally, how do you feel about sort of free access, whether that's post-festival or post mainstream distribution, or whether that's a web series and it's like the first thing you do is go free. Like what is the place of that, particularly if there's ad revenue to be had?
Speaking as a Frameline Voices filmmaker,
I wasn't digging with that.
I'm always thrilled to get that check for $100 from you, which, you know, is...
Once a week?
It's the annual $100, which is incredible for a movie that I made, you know, in 1957, and that, like, I'm thrilled that some, you know, people get to see it. And that, you know, as Frameline, as this entity where people go to see gay film, I get the marketing value, I get the, you know, your traffic, and people all over the world are watching my film. I mean, you almost don't even have to pay me. Actually, my last short, 575 Castro Street, is up on the Jewish Film Festival website or YouTube page for free, and I'm just happy that people are watching it, you know, and. So I think it always depends on, as a filmmaker, what your goals are, and I mean, you always end up, you know, and you know, whether you're like making some huge deal, and it's like, oh, we could go with, you know, IFC or Weinstein or something, and like, but is that going to be more money or more people, or, you know, it depends on what your priorities are. And so for me, like with 575 Castro Street, I'm just happy for anybody to see it. Like, I don't need to make any money off of it. Most films, that's not the case. But I mean, YouTube, you can actually have, like, I have stuff on my personal YouTube page, and you can generate a small amount of ad revenue stuff. And there was one filmmaker you were telling me about who put like a gay short and like actually has made.
Well, so Daniel Ribeiro, who's the director of The Way He Looks, which was a big screening the other night, he has a short film, his original, I Don't Want to Go Back Alone, is about 4 years old, played Frameline, was incredibly successful. And we were putting together films for our Youth in Motion collection, where we send queer films to gay straight alliances across the country and make curriculum for them. And we typically send on DVD. So I'm saying, you know, Daniel, can we get your film? Can we get your film? I'm on the phone with him, and he's like, I'm shooting a feature. And so obviously he made an amazing feature based on this short. And he says, you know, I just don't want to give you rights. I'm never going to get as much money from you as I can get from ads on YouTube. And I was really surprised, but he has over 3 million hits on his 17-minute Brazilian short film. It has subtitles, which is always really helpful on YouTube because a lot of foreign language folks are able to read and keep up with, you know, different languages, and YouTube will actually translate a lot of it. And so we ended up writing the curriculum for his film and just linking to his YouTube page, and that's how we were able to work out a deal for us to have it available for students. And be able to, you know, him to be able to keep it. But that, I mean, that was an interesting conversation for us to have, that 2 or 4 years ago would have been completely different for someone, for a filmmaker to say to, granted, a very small distributor, I make more money on YouTube, and to be right about it. I mean, I couldn't argue with him about it. So that was a really interesting conversation for me.
Alexis, do you know how much those 3 million views translated to?
I do not know. I would be very curious to know. I don't know if he's still in town, but other people may have other, you know, videos up that are doing that well. So okay, I think we're getting, you know, towards the end. I'd like to ask sort of what's happening now that you're most excited about, and sort of where do you think we'll be in 5 years? Can I answer either of those or both of those for everyone?
I was just going to say there's some really amazing LGBTQ content has always kind of been ahead of the curve in terms of web series and online availability and things like that. People have always been looking for it online, and the people who have made it have been able to create a name and use that as a springboard. And I'm really excited about the people who are making Ingrid Youngerman. F to Seventh is an amazing series going into production for season 3 soon. There's The Better Half, which is a web series that we've been working on, and it just got picked up by Pivot for the month of June. So people are really starting to make that leap. And then there's the example of Dear White People that premiered at Sundance and just had a huge Kickstarter, a great trailer that was viewed millions of times, and they were really able to leverage that into a deal that they were happy with Roadhouse Distribution for their theatrical run. And I mean, it was disappointing that it didn't sell fast, and it was disappointing that people didn't think it was I don't know what the deal was, but like, they had such a huge audience that they really were able to be patient and believe in their product and know that they had made something that people were excited about and use that to create a path to a theatrical run and a traditional distributor that they like. And I think that that's something that's gonna keep happening. It's something that we're really excited about help happen. Like right now, there's so many great producers and great all-in-one, not just writer, director, actors like Desiree, but just like producers who are rock stars, or like Emily Best from Seed&Spark, who can just like jump in and be trailblazing. But I don't think that that's something that every content creator needs to do, and I think there are going to be more niche companies that are able to just, instead of trying to conduct the train, just lay the track and build out an ecosystem so that more people can succeed by doing the things that they want to do, like making content. And I'm excited about getting new blood and new people excited on the distribution side so that content creators can focus on content instead of having to be an all-in-one package.
I think what's great is that for people who really make films as a way of making change, that there are now all the tools that you need to deliver to everybody who you want to participate in that process in all different types of venues. So that with this new film, I think there's great value to theatrical screenings, especially for a film about somebody who's leading people the way our film is, and they'll be able to see it in theaters if they want to, which is fantastic. And it will be possible to make it available for home use, at $20, and we spread around the money and everything for everybody who wants to see it. And it's also possible to make a short educational version available even for free through all the educational groups that might be interested in doing that. And you can do all of those different things without interfering one against the other. Because I think ultimately, the truth of the matter is that there are now so many people in the world and also so many films that for any one film to have much of a punch, it's got to come out in a whole bunch of different ways. There aren't many films that are going to have huge, theatrical releases because you can spend $100 million on advertising, and we don't have that type of bugs. So having all of these different pathways available is really a big plus.
Yeah, I think tools is the right word. I think that we've seen in the last 10, 15 years this sort of democratization of the production process through these cheaper and more accessible tools, cameras and other equipment, editing, whatnot. And now we're seeing the same process for the other side of the equation, which is getting people to see the works. And so over the next 5 years, I think we'll see these new ideas that are coming out, like theatrical on demand, like crowdfunding, and day and date releases. All this sort of experimentation will start to sort of congeal into a little bit more of a clear framework of tools for filmmakers to get their work to the audience now that they have such access to the tools to make it. And sort of that other side will fill out over the next 5 or 10 years.
I feel like there's one thing I want to talk about that I'm excited about, and then kind of this thing that I feel like depressed about is that like people have this idea that like, oh, with like Netflix and iTunes, like everything is available to us digitally, and like we can just magically like watch any movie, like it kind of like it was when VHS started, and we would be like, wow, we can just go to the video store and like see whatever we want.
But then why do I always go to Netflix and I can't find a movie I want?
No, that's the thing. The thing is that that is actually not the case, and that so having these other opportunities is like, this is a good thing. We're in this really weird moment where, there are tons of films that were released on VHS, for instance, that in fact actually never even made the leap to DVD, and now there are things that have been on DVD that are not making the leap to digital. So like, we showed Go Fish this morning at the Castro. Go Fish is not on iTunes. When Night is Falling is not on iTunes. there are all these films that have not made the leap, partly from SD to HD, and there are all this stuff about deliverables and and closed captioning, which is really great. That there's closed captioning required now, but it costs money. And anyway, so we're in this situation where a lot of our niche cinema heritage is not available to us. And so working with Wolfe, there are all these DVDs that have now gone out of print. Like Go Fish, Incredibly True Adventures, Saving Face, great classic films that, actually you should get your hands on the DVDs because they won't be available. And so that's the sad thing, and Netflix is we're not gonna do that because we actually make a lot more money on Spider-Man 3. So then this is the good thing that I'm excited about, which is Wolfe on Demand, which is our new, it's 2 years old now, where we get to have more, this is important to us, and we actually want to serve the community. And we're like, When Night is Falling is a really important film, and if it's only available on SD, that's okay. It should be available. So we have When Night is Falling. The only place you can see it digitally is wolfeondemand.com, and increasingly we have a lot more films like that, and that it's just always the case that LGBT distributors and entities are going to care more about our films than Netflix is, or Hulu, or any mainstream entity. So that's the exciting thing, and that other, and that YouTube, the Frameline Voices thing is amazing. People all over the world are accessing those films, and similarly, we're excited about that with Wolfe on Demand. But so
yeah, and before we open, we will be opening up in just a second. We're talking about a lot of different things here. Pick up the Frameline Filmmaker Toolkit. Check out the resources from Seed&Spark and IndieWire, and there was a crowdfunding panel yesterday that I was watching. There's so many amazing options to get the information out there, so check it out. There are requirements on iTunes and other platforms that it has to be, HD, and it has to be captioned, and you're going to be spending a lot of money going to an aggregator and getting your film up. You can do Vimeo Pro, and you can upload your film and get a 90-10 split, and you can be on Wolfe on Demand, and the nice thing about today is there are a lot of paths for films, and you just have to find the right one because. But it takes a little bit of research and time because it's no longer sort of I finished my film and yay, I have a distributor and now I'm going to move on to my next project and not have to think about it anymore. That model isn't really viable anymore, and for most filmmakers, making most of the types of films that we show at Frameline, which are more shorts than anything, a large number of docs, and all types of queer films. All right, so we're ready for questions. If you can be nice and loud, and if necessary, I'll try to repeat it if folks couldn't hear.
Hey, sorry, I've been in and out. My name's Mike, I program the Roxie. I was actually just on a panel about self-distribution last weekend, and there's a great new platform that I was exploring this week called VHX. And it's basically like WordPress. You can sell your movie through it. It's really cheap. I think it's less than 10%. You can just sell stuff through your own site and name your own price, and it's really versatile. It's really easy to set up. So that was sort of a revelation that any filmmakers here should check out. It's pretty awesome. VHX.
VHX is really great. There's also Distrify is really great, the downside of those things is then it's like all the marketing is all up to you, but you guys use VHX, don't you?
Yeah, we're billing ourselves as a multi-platform network, so we're using a lot of different people's players and platforms while we fundraise to build out a player ourselves. VHX is great. They're based in Brooklyn on my street, actually, that I live on, so that's been convenient. Their player is amazing. They offer a lot of really great analytics on the back end. It's 10% plus 50 cents for every unit that you sell, so it's a really good split. But I mean, I think marketing's such a good point. Like, we've been really playing around with how to, like, one of the big things with traditional distribution right now and getting your film picked up, even if you get that first fee, even if you're selling your film and the rights for a certain amount, the marketing recoupment is such a huge barrier to ever seeing any more money from your distributor, that figuring out how to split that up front or not. We don't recoup on marketing for films that we acquire outright, just because it does help to offset and bring filmmakers forward in the waterfall for splitting revenue once a film's out.
I always say, I mean, just on the marketing recoupment thing, I mean, any contract, you know, this is my filmmaker hat on, is like, you know, it's all negotiable. I mean, distributors will give you the contract and say, these are the terms and these are the, you know, and you reply and say, I want a cap on the marketing, and I want, you know, I want a more favorable percentage, and I want,
or
you know,
accounting.
and, sorry?
Or accounting.
Accounting.
Accounting, yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
to see that.
You know, but anyway, but I mean, as the director of consumer marketing, I work my ass off for your movies, and we have, you know, 30 years of relationships and connections and systems in place, and you know, 100,000 people on our mailing lists, and press and organizations, and you know, so the value that you're getting in all that marketing is, you know, significant. And do it yourself if you are so inclined. But
Yes, in the blue.
Hi, thanks a lot for the conversation. I'm wondering if you could talk in a little bit more detail about the potential trajectories for a narrative short, and particularly connecting with distribution. Is that something that you reach out to? Do you wait if you say have a film that's on the starting the festival circuit right now? And then if that's not going to be the route, how long do you actually wait to put it online? What are your thought process should it be? And then finally, any suggestions for publicity, getting it out there other than Facebook? What are your options if you don't really have a budget for that sort of thing?
I mean, do you have a film in Frameline? Yeah. I mean,
a bunch of festivals. I'm just wondering, this is our first big one, and Outfest and so on. Just wondering,
yeah.
What's the process?
Well, I mean, first of all, congratulations on being at Frameline, because that's going to save you. That is going to save you so much time and energy and work, that you have, you know, programmers who are either here who you're going to talk to and meet, and you're going to be brave and go talk to everybody, and you know, or who are looking at the festival catalog and writing you because you're in this festival, and that, you know, like we talked about, you know, festivals being, you know, sadly one of the biggest ways you're going to get the film out there. I keep sending people to Alexis. I'm like, oh, you should talk to Frameline. They distribute shorts.
Yeah, I mean, the hard thing is Frameline distribution is we acquire maybe a handful of shorts a year. We screen at Frameline, the film festival, about 120. So, you know, there's very little, I mean, the whole department is me and like one other person who's there part-time. So, you know, getting shorts picked up is really challenging. Shorts International seems to pick up a lot of great stuff that is general interest, that's not going to be LGBT. And also there are some foreign companies that are still doing compilations, and you know, we're trying to get back into that for Frameline distribution. But most of your LGBT distributors are not doing much with shorts right now. The thing that I put together the Filmmaker Toolkit with Sam Berliner, who's the festival director of the Translation Film Festival in Seattle, and you know, he's a filmmaker. He has a couple films. One, you know, CFMDC does his run on. One's on Frameline Voices. He does a lot of really good promotions for his films. One of the things that we suggest is when you're at your screening, I swear, like, get email signups from people in the crowd. For someone who works at Frameline, we'll be like, okay, go outside, we have to get our next screen up. But as someone advising filmmakers, you know, that's the best thing you can do, because you have someone who liked your film at Frameline, you had someone who liked it at Outfest. You're gonna build that community, get your email list, get your Facebook likes, get the film out there. And then when it's time to release, you know, have it set up for you may end up having to do self-distribution on a short, but you have these networks. Sometimes Frameline is able to link to a film that played previously. We'll put it at the bottom of our e-news and say, oh, here's this film you missed, check it out. Reach out to the people who've already liked your film at various festivals, and whether those are co-presenters, or those are the festivals themselves, or those are the people who've been viewing it, and ask them. And then once again, who are the community groups that liked your film? What's the subset of people that you're speaking to, if it is more specific? So all those things kind of add up, and unfortunately a lot of it does land on the filmmaker's shoulders, but right now there isn't a really great system for shorts to kind of be bundled and distributed through the more traditional methods. Netflix doesn't have one shorts program on their entire streaming platform. I've had conversations with them, and that's where they are present, and we hope that changes in the future. But some of these new platforms, they are giving those opportunities to filmmakers, and there's an interesting film that played a couple years ago called Shabbat Dinner, Michael Morgenstern's film. It's also on the Jewish Film Festival's streaming site, and
it's also on Seed&Spark streaming.
There you go. It's also on Seed&Spark. Michael is in our Filmmaker Toolkit. He has some really great tips on his short. He did a thing where he said, pay what you will for the short. A ticket at a screening is $9, so the minimum's $1. Pay whatever you want to watch the film. He told me he got $4 on that. Most people are charging 99 cents or $2.99 for a short, but if he did a pay what you want model, that got money. Some people do a preview where you watch the first few minutes for free, and then you have to pay to continue. That usually has like a 30% conversion rate. So think about what you can do with a short that you can't do. If you're distributing yourself, you can do all these crazy things. He said he would do live Q&As with his films, or leave his cell phone number so people could call him and ask him questions. I mean, I'm not, I don't have that kind of energy as a guy in his 20s, but it was really interesting. And, look at what other people are doing, because some people are finding a way to make it work, but now he does have it online for free. But he took a couple years to do that.
And we are acquiring shorts along with web series. We're really excited about it, and we've been able to, we're building out our first foray into a subscription model is called the Spotlight series, which launches in August, and we're pairing shorts and web series with features that we've acquired and sending it out as a curated bundle of packaging just for a flat fee with some essays and behind the scenes and things like that. So we're really interested in making short monthly programs that we can put a lot of different mixed formats and genres into the package and send it out, and really bolster awareness and things like that around these accumulated audiences, so that the fans of the web series are now being introduced to the short and maybe being put in context with a film that played at a festival but hasn't been seen since. So.
Yeah, and that kind of experiential part of viewing film is very unique to younger generations of people who are approaching queer films. So it's nice to have that kind of different idea. It's really great to have different options, because if you look, people are approaching festivals, streaming, media, all of it very differently depending on location, geographically, and depending on age. So that's cool. Thanks. Questions? Yes.
A comment and a question. You had started the panel asking about the relevance of film festivals around the country, and are they still relevant? And I think if you take last night's screening of Being Decay, where you not only got to see this great film, but you had this experience of being in the room with George and his husband and the filmmaker, and sitting there with however many thousand people the theater holds, with people who think like you do and who want to share that experience. So my comment is that I think it's very hard to get that experience outside of film festivals. And I see that as, whether you're big like Frameline or even a small film festival, there's that opportunity. Now that being said, I think for as many people that were in the room, there probably would have been people across the country who would have tuned in on the web to hear George speak last night. Can we ever envision a Frameline that offers that film festival opportunity to maybe someone sitting in Kansas who can't fly here, but the Frameline brand is so strong that perhaps someone around the globe could tune in to have heard George speak and hear his jokes and hear the filmmaker make her comments?
Thank you. That's such a great comment. I think we can definitely envision it. I think we're envisioning it all the time. So the question is, in terms of George speaking, we have a videographer here today, and we've been doing a Frameline Green Room project since Frameline38, where we do try to have that, asking queer filmmakers the questions that they're not getting asked through mainstream media, and doing a little video recording and putting that online, because San Francisco is very different than most places in the country where these films screen, and you can ask filmmakers, was this a different kind of screening? And they'll be like, yes, they laughed at different times, they experienced it differently, this is a very different crowd. So, we have been doing some of that. When it comes to sort of, we want to show it at Frameline, then also have it screening, day and date, streaming at the same time. It's something that, as an organization, we would love to do. We would love for Frameline nationally to be, that go-to queer place that, in Kansas they're watching it. And, there is a delicacy around other film festivals. If we screen it and everyone can see it, then when Atlanta or someone in Texas or any of these other queer film festivals go to screen it to their community, in some ways they might be denying their local folks the opportunity to sit in the room with the filmmaker and to have that. So it's definitely something we think about, but it's harder to navigate in terms of what festivals have traditionally been, which is a one-time screening for the most part.
I had a question for Max. Seems like you're creating the new digital platform for the lifespan of a film from beginning to the end of the audience. And I'm wondering if you could give an example of, say, I have an idea of a gay film with a substantial budget, like $500,000, and your vision for like what the future of that would be for creating that film and finding its audience.
I think that's a great question, because I think the development stage of the filmmaking process is really matches well with what we're doing in terms of crowdfunding and audience building, so that you can, if you have a substantial budget that you're trying to raise, like $500,000, you can start with some incremental amount and do some sort of development campaign and prove the concept and show that there is an audience for what you're doing. And then once that is successful, then you can build on top of that with another campaign, or you can go and find more traditional financing. But it all starts with finding that core audience at the start of the process. So you can you and your team do that research and outreach to find the people who are fragmented around, across various social media platforms and different media outlets that they may subscribe to that would be interested in your project, and start to collect them. And then as you go along and raise more money, you can build on top of that and take it all the way through to your production and distribution. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and then and what's your vision of the future of filmmaking for as it applies to these new opportunities in digital distribution and
just generally, where?
Yeah, if you can project 10 years in the future, or.
Then I'd be a very rich man.
We have a membership program. If you're interested for when you're a very rich man.
I have a crowdfunding campaign for when you're a very rich man.
I think right now it's about experimenting, all these different angles, self-distribution, being part of aggregators, trying different methods for which festivals you apply to, and all this stuff is just trying to figure out the way forward, because I think that in the last 5 years, a lot of what was dependable in the distribution game has become less so. So I don't know exactly where it will end up, but I know that there are very clear opportunities to experiment across the board. And so I think it's important that everyone is doing this experimentation and sharing the results with each other, so that we can figure out what to build on and what to discard in the process.
When I go back to Australia next month, there are several films I've seen at the festival that I want to see brought to Australia. Does Frameline have links for me to contact the filmmaker so that I can find out what the process is?
Yes, we have a print source guide, Frameline38 print source guide, and it'll always have the contact information for, it's an archaic term, but for where we got the print, back from when you would have a 35mm print for these. And so that'll be either the filmmaker if they're distributing independently, or it'll be the distributor. So yeah, it should be, it's definitely on our website. I don't know if they're directly under each film like they are in past years. I will check with Kevin on that. But yeah, that information is always available, and that is one of the wonderful things that festivals generally provide is, you know, a print source guide so that other festivals and other individuals are able to kind of track down where these films came from. So yeah, check it out. Thank you. Yes?
Hi, I work in social media. I'm not actually a filmmaker, but I would love to work with filmmakers because they're really good at making films. But it seems that the role of the filmmaker has expanded exponentially in the last few years, and now you're analytics nerds, you're crowdfunders, you're marketeers. How can we, as a sector, better support filmmakers to do what they do best, and build their skills and build that team that Max was talking about, of people around filmmakers and films to get those great results?
I think for me, the potential of social media is so great, and yet it is so constrained for commercial reasons. So for example, Facebook, we all use Facebook and think it's this public space, but it's not. It's controlled for profit. And the same with Twitter and everything else. So on Facebook, you could figure out every connection that you have and every connection that they have, and it would be a massively useful networking tool. But instead, Facebook has set up things now, so it's difficult to even find out who are your friends who live in San Francisco. In fact, it's almost impossible. And it used to be very easy, but they figured, oh no, if you do that, you're going to use it and message to everybody, and you're not going to buy ad revenue, or you're not going to buy to boost your thing. So if there were a public social media, the way there's still public TV almost, it would be amazing. It would truly be remarkable. Or even if there were just tools to jack Facebook so you could actually use it, it would be amazing. So that's what social media people could do for us. And if you work for Facebook or Google, I'm sorry, but that's what we need.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that, you know, in our toolkit and generally people talk about how they work around Facebook. If you create an event for every screening, then you're able to invite your friends to each event. So people will have an event for the launch of their Kickstarter, an event for every single screening, you know.
Except then you have people like me who are like, I block all my event invitations because it's just a bunch of junk.
That's why I never come to my parties, Jenni.
I didn't
The best parties in San Francisco.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually Dean was saying just before the show how he was launching Kickstarter, is that right? And he immediately got 10 emails saying that, you know, people who want to do your social media for you. But I think, yes, there's a market for that, for people who don't want to do it themselves and be there, but I also think one of the most important things about social media is a voice. And that voice has to be aligned with your film and with your constituency. And if you hire someone who isn't like, oh my God, I love the idea of your project, or I love whatever, and it's just like, if you pay me $200, I'll do this for you. You know, I think you're gonna get a different kind of social media, and one that people are gonna notice is bullshit, probably. Because people can tell when someone's tweeting because they're trying to sell something, and when they're tweeting because they're having a good time. So I think as someone who's working in the industry, you know, find the projects, find the films that you liked, find that filmmaker and be like, what are you working on next? I want to help you. And you know, if you're passionate about it and you're helping them with that, then you're going to prove yourself so much on that next film that then you'll just continue to find projects that you're enthusiastic about. And in many ways, it's much like production, I think.